Welcome, everybody. This is the Microsoft Graph Community Call for January of 2021. Today on our session, we're going to be having Molly and Kevin presenting. Molly will be talking about changelog version 2, some new recent updates that we have releasing for that. Also like to get some of your feedback on that. And then Kevin will be joining us doing a community demo talking about a meeting booking app that he's developed on top of Microsoft Graph and some other related technologies. So I'd like to showcase those for you. One of the things that we will add to the agenda, I will just make a quick note of, we do have a Microsoft Graph developer survey that's coming from our team. Different kind of pieces of feedback that we'll be looking for in terms of how you're integrating with Microsoft Graph, what are some of the different things you'd like to see us make investments into. So we'll get to that here in a second, and then we have our two topics for the day as well. Also note that if you are interested in presenting, again, we do have slots available to us later in this year. If you'd like to present on anything related to Microsoft Graph, whether it's a solution that you've built, some kind of new thing that you're working on, other kind of things you'd like to showcase, please do reach out to us. You can reach us at brian.jackett@microsoft.com or jeremy.thake@microsoft.com. Please do include things like the solution or the topic that you'd like to review, what other APIs are being used, or any of the kind of platforms or services that are included in that. We'll take a look at that, work with you on something we can fit into our schedule later on in the year. And we do appreciate any kind of contributions or things you'd like to share with us. I do want to call out on here, we do have a Microsoft Graph developer survey that has been launched just at the end of December. Really, this will take about 5 minutes to fill out. What we're looking for is different things that you're perhaps using inside Microsoft Graph. What are some of the different areas that you think could use some more investment, whether that's code samples, documentation, different aspects of the graph itself. So please do take the time to fill this out. So you can get to this at aka.ms/graph-dev-survey. And please do take the time to fill this out. That'll be great for us to get this feedback and incorporate this into our planning for the coming semester. Without further ado, we'll hand things over to Molly to talk to us about the Microsoft Graph changelog version 2. Molly, the floor is yours. Do you want to go ahead and take over presenting?
I would. Give me just a moment. Let's talk about the changelog, the labor of love of my past many months. We have included many beautiful new features in the changelog 2.0. You can filter by date, parent workload, and version. You can also filter by change type, but I forgot to put that into the slide. You can subscribe to an RSS feed, and we have searchability. There's also a bunch of fancy automation stuff under the hood, which is very exciting for us and probably less exciting for you. But what you need to know is that it's significantly less likely to have typos in it. Links are oftentimes going to go to the correct place and not to wrong places, and many different aspects of human error have been eliminated. We also have future plans for it, although our future plans in large part depend on your feedback. I think it's very important to have a dark mode, but that won't be coming for a long time. But soon, we are hoping to have better support on notifying about deprecation and fixing a couple of just miscellaneous tiny UX front-end things. We'd like sovereign cloud support as well, and we want to do PowerShell support, but we just haven't gotten there yet. If you'd like to try it, feel free to click there if you have the slides downloaded, or if you would like, you can type in the URL and try it out for yourself. I'm going to do the equivalent right now, where I pull up the changelog, and then here we have the changelog. Let's just say that you want to see everything having to do with the event entity. You can type that in. And in theory, oh, here it is, event. And it doesn't just show you things in calendar, it will show you things in identity and access, although that's a different one. Oh, and something in lifestyle notification, still about the event entity. So you can see sort of cross API changes to a specific entity. If you're like, I only care about things in event for beta, then that all tracks. Lovely date filters if you would like them. So I think you all are getting the general idea, but please come try it out. Let me know what you all think. And specifically, I'm going to get back to the slides so we can talk about feedback. I would love to have feedback on this. What features come next is going to depend largely on your feedback and support directly. So please give it to me. Otherwise, I'll just go on vacation. Please @ me in the chat if you would like to do something, or email mollyshove@microsoft.com. Please put feedback, changelog feedback into the subject line, so that way I can find it and I don't lose it. And also so my email rules can do magical things, so it's easier to sort and keep track of what everyone says. And then I would prefer if everyone is very specific in their feedback. So don't tell me that it looks bad. tell me that the title should be green and in Comic Sans, or don't tell me that because that's probably not going to happen. I feel as if I'm not sure what marketing is doing right now, but I don't think Comic Sans is in their plans. All right, that's all for me, unless anybody has any questions, comments, thoughts, feelings that they want to share.
So for everyone, if you'd like to put your comments or questions into the text box, or if you can do the raise hand feature in Teams, we can then kind of go through people as they come through. One thing I do have for you, Molly, I saw that it has a preview at the top of the new changelog. What's the timeline for us getting to V1 or full release for this?
Very soon, like a month. We just wanted to run both systems in parallel to make sure that this one is just as, if not more consistent than the old one.
Okay, so the link inside the documentation will then point to the new one once it is released, correct?
Exactly.
Excellent. Any questions from the community? The things you'd like to see? Any kind of feedback? Any questions you'd like to ask while we have Molly here on the line? Question from Christoph. Where do we get these slides or URLs? We do not publish the slides themselves, but we do record all the meetings. And we'll put these onto our, I think it's the YouTube channel. And we have a link to that at the very end of the session on here. Which specific URLs are you looking for would be one question. We did put the changelog v2 URL into the chat, but if you have more specific on that, that'd be helpful, Christoph. One question I did also say for you, Molly, is I know RSS support was something that you added into this. Is that something that you could demo for us? Because I know it's been a heavily requested feature from a lot of folks.
It is not something that I can actually demo particularly quickly or smoothly because okay. I am not a person who's very fluent with RSS. So it does work. I will say that if you are testing it, it's in, at least in the version of Edge that I use, it tries to format the RSS a little bit. And so you need to make sure that you're not just opening up the window, but that you're opening it, like you're inspecting and seeing the elements and getting sort of the raw RSS. I also think that it's worth noting, and I can actually demo for you, that the RSS is filterable, which is exciting. So the filters that you use to filter the content will also filter the changelog. Let me see if I can show that.
So if I wanted to filter for just an RSS of SharePoint and Planner, for instance, I could do that and get back just a feed of those things that have changed for those two services.
Yes, we're back here. And yeah, if I am very excited about change notifications because I'm being meta. There's the RSS for that.
Excellent.
And if I'm not interested in being meta, and I'm looking at change notifications, I get a whole lot more.
Wall of text, I love it.
It's beautiful. Okay, any other features or things that you want to see? I was actually going to demo Clear All, so that does that. You know, all these links link to the respective documentation. Let's see if this one works. Yes, it does. It's always good when you're demoing something, it works. Not always been my experience with demos.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we did find a couple of things to get updated, I think in November, December, which thankfully you and team were able to quickly go and get addressed.
Yes.
I do see one question here. What does the number mean behind the services? I believe it means the ones in parentheses next to each of the...
Okay, yes. So that is sort of each change, which given the format of the old changelog, which we came over, sometimes there's more than one change per sort of change entity. So for example, the date format and time format properties to mailbox settings were changed. So that this is just the number of changes. So of the 50 user changes, there's 43 additions and 7 changes and 0 deletions. 27 of them are in beta or are in V1, 23 are in beta, etc. And so if you were looking for all deletions that happen in calendar, there's 3. Although this deletion accounts for multiple things. Is that making sense to everybody?
Makes sense to me. I hope that does that answer your question, Andreas?
Yeah, I'm currently blind to chat, so
That's okay.
Yeah.
There's one other question I'm going to hold to the end of the Q&A because it's more appropriate for a separate thing. Any other questions related to changelog or other feedback that you have at the moment? Feel free to type it into there. Okay, if not, Molly, really appreciate your time this morning getting to show this and all the work that you've done to get this version 2 out there. We definitely look forward to V1 when this can be launched and we can use it for our day-to-day uses.
Awesome, no worries. Thank you. Also, if you do think that it looks nice and stuff, please also send those emails to me. Like, it doesn't all have to be constructive criticism, in part because if you are all feeling very satisfied with it, then we can get it into GA sooner, probably, rather than later. Like, if you are the people who judge to say, hey, this is ready in a big and deep way. So let me know. And I'm really just excited to set it free and into the wild.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, and we'll look forward to seeing this once it is finally GA. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on our agenda, we have Kevin Ritchie, who'll be doing a community demo. Kevin, do you want to take over presenting?
Right. Well, thanks for having me on, Brian. It was quite a shock to actually get someone to get in touch and say, how do you fancy talking on a community call? So I'll hold my hands up straight away and say this is my very first community call ever. And first ever demo. So people will have to bear with me. If it isn't great, I do apologise. One of the things I do have to say equally is that the demo that I'm actually going to show you is for a booking in-app. So this is more to sort of replace paper-based sign-in inbox. When people visit your offices, you know, they used to sign in, say who am I here to visit, all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of what this app's there to replace. Now, I've kind of been interested in, you know, the graph and keeping an eye on it for quite a while, and I was always waiting for that opportunity to use it. And when the guys at the office were like, we're almost at the end of this book, you know, and this book's probably, you know, quite old, so let's get rid of it. You know, we need to have something electronic. You know, there's plenty of pieces of software out there that do this already. But, you know, for me, it was, you know, we wanted to try out building something in Blazor because it was, you know, new for us. We quite liked it. We thought, yeah, let's have a go at that. But also, it was an opportunity to use the graph as well. So it was quite an easy decision for us to make, to say, well, okay, let's just build something of our own. It's an internal application for business. It's not a commercial application. So, you know, let's spend a bit of time researching the graph and Blazor and things, and let's see what we can pull together. So over, you know, course of a day, we managed to pull together a fairly decent application for us to use. We were quite pleased with it, and the bonus is management were quite happy with it. So that's always a good start. So the app itself, like I say, is a Blazor application, server side. The only thing that we really needed to add into this application, which, you know, to get the actual connection to the graph, and it's really easy, is you just download the Microsoft Identity Client NuGet package, and that's as much as we needed to be able to, you know, hook into the graph. The other bits we needed to do for the application was storing references to our authentication authority. We need to store things for our tenant ID, client ID, and a client secret. You know, the bits that, you know, we were going to pass to the graph to be able to get a token and then, you know, communicate with the graph and do what we need to do with the certain APIs we need. Now, the sort of the first thing we needed to do, and I appreciate, you know, from teaching people to suck eggs, I'm sorry, you know, I'll just quickly go through this before we jump into, you know, a quick demo, is that we needed to create an app registration in the Azure portal. And it's relatively straightforward. Just generating an app, go search for an app registration, you generate it. The one thing we failed to realize is we've got, you know, multiple tenants, just making sure you create this app registration in the right tenant. Otherwise, you know, the results you're going to get back when you're searching for, you know, employees or anything might not be the right ones. So it's always worth noting that, making sure you're pointing at the right tenant, you know, when you're creating this app registration. In the app registration, there was, you know, we had to create the secret that we were going to use for the application, and also configure the Graph API itself and what permissions we wanted to use. Now, you can have delegate permissions or application permissions. For us, because this was a standalone application, there was no one logging into it, so we just went for the application permissions and using user read all permission, because all we needed access to was managers and their direct reports and photos. That's all we needed. So it's really straightforward. And in terms of storing the sort of secrets, like your client secret, your tenant ID, and things like that, we have actually stored those in the app settings JSON file. And I know many people are crying horror, but we decided to do that because it's a local app to us. It's within our network, and we wanted to get the app up quick and get it running. Ideally, and in future sort of versions of the application, we can move that off into the Azure Key Vault and keep all the information there so we know it's secure. Now, connecting to the graph, after we've downloaded the Microsoft Identity Client, we're able to create a confidential client application builder. And what we do with that is that gives us the ability to acquire a token for our client application. And we're just using a basic HTTP client to construct our requests and send them across to the graph to be able to get the information out of the APIs that we need. And the only APIs we really used here were the user's direct reports and the user photo, so we can have a nice little photo when a visitor wants to select which person they're there to visit. So what I'll do, now we're at the demo, what I'll do is I'll quickly take people through just a quick snippet of the code that we wrote, just to connect into the graph. And again, very, very straightforward. It's not complicated, and that's the thing I like about this. It's a good thing about the graph is that it's easy to get started with. Lots of information on Docs Microsoft as well, and equally a good tool to use was the Graph Explorer because it's a good sort of test bed for firing in your APIs to test. Make sure that they're returning the right thing. So that was handy. So as you can see, as I alluded to, we're keeping the settings within the app settings JSON file for the application. And this is just a way of us getting that information out of the app settings. We create our URI for authority. Here, we're new up a confidential client application builder, obviously passing our client ID, authority, the secret, giving ourselves a scope for that. And this is the bit where we actually acquire our token by the confidential client application builder, which we'll then use to pass in with the request headers, the authorization request headers with the client. So you can see here the result. So we have our access token. Once we have that, it means we're then authenticated within the graph. And the easy thing to do here for us, some naughty code here in there is, don't cry, it's hard-coded email addresses for some of the managers. There's only 5 of us in the business, it's not big. So we quickly hard-coded it in there just to get the app up and running. Ideally, obviously we'd store that in a database somewhere or whatever. So for each of the managers in the business, we used the direct reports to get all the direct reports from each of those managers. And if we were successful in getting that information and parsing it and looping through each of the users or the direct reports for that manager, and then we could pull out their ID, the employee name, their email address, and equally their photo, and then do a bit of code to then convert that photo information to a base64 string, and then we're able to then write that out within the HTML of the application. So created our own little class to hold the Paradise computing employee information. We're then able to utilize that in the application.
And Kevin, I know one thing that you and I discussed previously was potentially replacing some of the HTTP calls or some of the custom classes with some of like the SDKs for ease of use, for actually being able to, hey, I've got a strongly typed entity, I've got other things I can do directly with it, right?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that eventually we'd like to do, and hopefully this will come in with the Graph API at some point, is being able to communicate with teams directly as well. Because one of the things in the application itself as well is that once someone's booked into the business, it then uses Power Automate to then send a notification to that person or the employee that's been visited that someone is now in reception waiting for them. So that's obviously the code's not here for that. That's a Power Automate thing. But what I wanted to do is sort of steer away from that a little bit, because obviously this is a Microsoft Graph Community Core, and to sort of more focus on the graph side of things. So the application itself, very straightforward. We can check in. All they have to do is supply an email address what that'll do, the system in the background is going off and checking if this person's actually been here before. If they have, they'll present them the screen with their details to say, yeah, is this you? And if it is, we'll bypass entering your information. So you enter your company information, your name. You can enter your vehicle registration if you need to. Accept health and safety policy for the site. And at the start of the application, basically what it was doing was running off into the graph, and it was pulling out all this information. And as you can see, it was all the people in the business. We can then select the person they're going to see. And then a notification has gone off via Power Automate to that user that someone is there to see them in reception. Once the person's left site, they can come in, select their name, and that's them checked out. So that's the application itself. It's very, very simple, I know. But it did fill a quick requirement in the business, and it allowed us to utilize the graph and have our sort of first steps with it. So yeah, we were quite pleased with how it came out in the end.
That's great to see, and I like that you mentioned about calling into graph. You already have access to who are my users, who is their manager, who is their direct reports. I've got my profile pictures. Like we're basically reusing all the data inside of M365 inside of an application. So you don't have to go and create. Oh, here's my user store, and here's my set of relationships for who reports to who. Like it's all existing information that you can kind of reuse.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things we also loved about it was the fact that we didn't have to manage those users. So if we have new employees joining the business, they're already there. They've been added to Active Directory or whatever, they're in M365, so we can pull them out straight away. They're just there. There's no management of that, which is great. One of the things that we did look at, and this is one of the sort of play projects that I've got on the side, is then using the Azure Cognitive Services to be able to use either face recognition or the speech services, so that we can actually, people don't have to touch keyboards. The computer itself can visualize the person. You can speak to it, and it'll actually do the booking process for you. So you don't have to use your hands. What I did do, I have written on an article myself, Microsoft Graph First Steps as well. So there's a quick blog post that will take you through how we created the app registration, how we, the code snippets for how we connected, and all the sort of links to those resources in Microsoft Docs as well, so straight to the APIs and everything like that. So that's all there. So really that's it from me. But if anyone does, have any questions, happy to take them now. If you want to message me via Twitter, you can. Just my DMs are open, so you can get in touch with me via there. I'm usually on it most of the day. Don't tell anyone. Oh no, I told everyone. And equally, you can get in touch via the website as well. So yeah.
Okay. Carl, I see post URL, please. Is that for the blog post, or was that for something else? Just double checking on that.
Oh, what? So the URL?
I think you had your blog URL, or at least the site in there. But if you have a deep link to that actual post, that would be extra helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I can paste the link to the site into the chat, so people can quickly check that there. But yeah, so that's the sort of my sort of quick overview of the graph part of connecting with our booking app. So that's all there.
Excellent. Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Kevin. You did a great job for your first community presentation here.
Well, see, this is it. This is where I'll watch this recording back in horror. But appreciate you inviting me on. And like I say, if anyone does have any questions, then I'd love to take them.
Yeah, I'd love to see, in the future, if you do update this with things like either Microsoft Graph Toolkit, using the SDKs, using the Azure Cognitive Services, kind of like what are those V2 steps, and like how did you arrive upon which ones are most important to implement first, or things like that. That'd be great to just even hear from a community perspective of, hey, we've got our V1 launch out there, and then what do we do to kind of build upon that further and leverage more services or leverage more features? Absolutely, yeah, and I'd definitely love to get back in touch once we've got something like that. Absolutely. Again, really appreciate your time, Kevin. Thank you so much for sharing this demo and kind of walking us through how you integrate Microsoft Graph and all the other kind of components that went with that as well. All right, thank you. Thank you so much. All right, I will take back over, present my screen. At this time, we've probably got about 10, 15 minutes or so. If anyone has any questions, any other kind of things they'd like to ask while we've got a number of community folks here and other Microsoft Graph team members. One question I will go back up, the question about doing a verbose query into Microsoft Graph. Let me find that again. Yep. Does Graph have a verbose option to add in the OData REST query? So if I'm understanding the question correctly, what's the actual underlying query that's being made, whether that's like the internal API or what else is being sent through that? And I will share out my screen here real quick. Let's go over to Graph Explorer. And you can get to this through aka.ms/ge, aka.ms/ge. It's kind of a quick link to get into here. And one of the things that's actually blogged about in December on the Microsoft Graph blog, there's the possibility of passing in what we call the what if query parameter. Now, this isn't going to be documented out in the actual documentation, but it is possible that when I make a request to Graph, if I just do my simple run query on here, I'll see back what the results are. But if I append onto this, the query string, additional parameter in here, $what if, when you run this, it'll actually show you what's the underlying API. So here's my URL. If I can highlight it properly. This is actually what we're going against. So here it's graph.windows.net, v2, and you can see over here are the users, basically the user that's being passed into. Now, what's fun is if you are trying to debug a scenario, sometimes you'll have a invalid syntax or something else that is not getting back the happy path that you're thinking. So if I go to something like me/join teams, and also one other awesome little highlight on here, we do have IntelliSense now on Graph Explorer as well. We just released that, I believe, in December. So thank you to Betty and team for getting that out there. So I can actually do IntelliSense to look up different queries that are happening on here. But if I look at something like me/join teams, instead of going against that graph.windows.net, which is essentially the Azure Active Directory endpoint, instead go to here for the join teams, I can now pass on that what if as well. And you'll see that instead, we're actually going to one of the Teams endpoints. So teamsgraph.teams.microsoft.com. Now, the whole point of having Graph as an entity is that you don't need to worry about these underlying APIs. So what's the actual endpoint that this is going against? But it can help from a kind of diagnosing or troubleshooting perspective to know that, hey, this query is going against SharePoint, or this one's going against Outlook, this one's going against Azure Active Directory, so that when things happen differently or you're getting back maybe a different response than is expected, you get a little bit of insight into, oh, it's because it's going to this API and it's a valid syntax here, but it may not be a valid syntax there. So just something to know that you can pass that in for that $what if to kind of give you the more verbose option of what's going on. Okay, let me see what else we have in the chat on here. My coach is asking, there's a flag on the bookings page. How to turn this flag on using Microsoft Graph API or some other script, change the default flag to on. May have to follow up on that one offline, unless Fabian, I know you're kind of our resident bookings expert, if you have anything to bring in on Pankaj's question on here.
Let me read the question and then I'll respond back in comment if I have a response. Sorry.
Sure, sounds great.
Thank you.
Steve's asking, trying to use the Microsoft Bookings API to report off of group bookings. Can you just further explain, is that for Microsoft 365 group bookings?
Yeah, Microsoft 365 group bookings, and we actually have no problem with reporting off of standard bookings. It's just the group bookings appear to not be exposed via Microsoft Booking API. I actually have a point open up with Microsoft Premier to just find out if if it's a feature. But I checked all the docs and I was not able to see any references to the actual group bookings. So I did also check the Graph Explorer and everything. Tried to use the calendar API. So I was just curious if anyone else on this call was running into that. Thank you.
I do know. Sure. I do know on the Exchange side, support for Microsoft 365 groups is not fully there. So if they are leveraging the underlying Exchange APIs, it may just be a lack of support on that end. It is something that's being worked on. I don't have any kind of timeline for that, but it is something that they're aware of. So that'll be my first guess as to it will work for individual users because we do have support for full calendaring of users, but we don't have it for the groups. So that would be my first guess on that one. A question here from Christoph. How does theming work today? More specifically, is MGT compatible with Fluent UI Northstar? Oh my, is Sebastian on the line? I know he is one of our resident experts on MGT. I don't see Beth or Nicola in the call either. I know with MGT, they did just release the version 2, and there was some mentioning about adding theming support. I don't know if that actually made it into the V2 release or not, or if that's something that's going to be coming at a later date. But I'll have either Elise or Sebastian or someone else see if we can get any kind of update on that. Question here from Jose. A developer SPA using Graph on SharePoint. Some libraries and production fields are not indexed. Do you have any guidelines for SharePoint admin to do this properly?
Yes, I developed this app in an SPA in Angular, and it's using Graph for searching on SharePoint libraries. And the production libraries, some of them are not indexed properly. I'm getting errors, right? But that field need to be indexed, or now just cannot query information. It doesn't return the graph query in Explorer, doesn't return any errors, just doesn't return any data. But when I go to the SharePoint library, I see the data there. So I just wanted to give the administrator a guideline or document so he can do it properly. It was working in QA, but we're having this problem in production right now.
That sounds to me like a SharePoint setting, because you can set a column or a field to be indexed or not. So when you actually set up the document library, check to see if those list settings, if they have each of the different columns that you're looking for, whether they're set to indexed or not. And I know once you cross that magical kind of 5,000 or 20,000 limit, you may have to do some kind of readjusting to actually make them indexable. But take a look at that first and make sure that all the settings are matched up, because that would be the first guess for why it wouldn't be returning data if it doesn't actually have that indexed for that column.
Okay, thank you. Can you elaborate on the maximum amount while you were talking about that?
Well, yeah. So for SharePoint list items, there's once you cross 5,000 items is what the typical number is. They implement a different set of kind of almost throttling, so that you can't return all 5,000 plus of those items. There is some variance in that depending on if you're a user versus administrator. Not something I've had to deal with in quite a while, so I won't be the expert on that. But generally, once you have more than 5,000 items in a list, you may or may not be able to actually add an index to a new column. Sometimes you have to go below that limit, add the index, and then be able to then go back above the limit.
Okay. I think they already maxed out it exceeded the max 5,000 items. Okay. So that means they cannot reindex that field, for example.
It's been a really long time since I've had to deal with that, so okay. I'll have to rely on one of my SharePoint peers to give more full account on that.
Oh, okay. Thank you for your insight, your response.
And
thank you.
I see you got a follow-up question here. When does the contains option be available in Graph? Which API or which endpoint are you looking at for that contains option?
The Microsoft Graph endpoint version 1. I'm using in my application Start With, but I found that I found that version 1 or that Graph doesn't support the contain option.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think that's going to be a limitation of Graph as a whole. If you look, we do have documentation in terms of what are the supported query strings. Let me go back to Graph reference. Use query parameters. And so in here, you'll see what are the supported kind of filters. So when you do a filter parameter, here is what is supported at a high level. So you'll see like starts with or ends with. And here, contains is not supported on any of the Graph resources. I think this is more of a platform architecture level thing. I have not heard any roadmap items for supporting contains, but I would bring that up with probably Daryl or one of our other architects if that's ever going to be on our roadmap.
Okay, no problem. Yep. I code around it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Another item about the teams, so MGT, being able to use Fluent. Again, we'll have to follow up with some of our MGT folks. When will the next PowerShell Graph SDK updates be pushed? No, not a problem. If you actually follow along under the GitHub repo for this, I know that it's not following the strict cadence of what we have for some of the other ones, because it literally did just release the V1. Let's see here, GitHub, Graph, PowerShell SDK. Here you go. You can follow along under, I believe they've got releases in here somewhere. Perhaps not. Let's see. Oh, here releases.
Thank you, Brian. I recently did a lot of stuff with this, and it seems like it's not the final thing yet, right?
So the PowerShell SDK is version 1. It is production supported if you want to be able to use it. It did just release a V1 though in, what was that, around Ignite time of last year. So if you have feature requests or things that you're looking for in here, definitely feel free to add them as issues onto the GitHub repo here. There's something that they are, prioritizing in terms of things that are coming up. The latest release I saw was 1.2, but I don't believe this is being at the same cadence as releases for like the .NET, JavaScript, and some of the other managed code libraries.
Okay, thank you very much. I just found it I found it really cool, and then there was so few samples out on the web, and it led me back to the GitHub repo, and that was the only source. And I was like, if they don't know anything else, then probably nobody else will. So thank you anyway.
If you'd like to, please type up that feedback and send it over to me, brian.jacket@microsoft.com. I was talking with some of the folks who actually manage this SDK about how can we best publish some samples for this. I know that we do have like the PowerShell gallery, and there's some other different repos online for samples. We don't have like an official place for them for PowerShell, but something that is top of mind for that team. So the more feedback that they get, the more we can kind of prioritize this and figure out what is the best home for those types of samples or other types of things that we can share. And the other little side piece of this as well is we are working on adding PowerShell samples to the documentation. So when you look at, for example, even just going to like users, get user, you'll see in the docs down here, we have samples for HTTP, C#, JavaScript, Objective-C, Java. At a later date, we will add one for PowerShell. No timeline on that. It is work in progress. And it's a little bit different in how we generate those samples compared to some like the managed code languages. So just note that is something on our roadmap. I just don't know where exactly that's going to land.
Okay, perfect. And if there's an update and there will be a tab for PowerShell, how would I find out? I mean, I'm checking regularly, but not on a day-to-day basis. So
sure. Ideally, we would have it in, well, I don't know if it would land in the change log because it's not really a programmatic thing. I would say look for a blog post on that because that seems like something worthy of an announcement for that.
Okay, sure. But thank you for considering my question. There's another one for me straight after that, but I don't know if that's been handled or not. But thank you anyway.
The question about why is there no like filter parameter? Like will be the same thing as contains because it'll be essentially a wildcard search on both sides, front and back. So we support the starts with and ends with. I don't believe we support contains because of the just the architecture of what's available to us today.
Okay, thank you.
I don't see any additional questions on here, and we are getting close to our end of time. Really do appreciate everyone joining us today. Flip back over to our slides. I do want to call out, we do offer the Microsoft Graph TAP, which is our technology adoption program. This is an opportunity, basically, folks who are under NDA, if you don't have one, we can get you under NDA. A way for you to get kind of early access to, what's coming with Graph, what are some things that are going to be in beta, give us feedback on things that are in design, basically things that we're going to be working on. If you're interested in joining into the Microsoft Graph TAP, you can fill out the form down here at the bottom. Also do call out that we have a number of different Microsoft 365 developer community calls. So ourselves as the Microsoft Graph, also Adaptive Cards, Microsoft Teams, Office, Power Apps, SharePoint, and many more. So feel free to go take a look at this at aka.ms/M365devcalls. Also, our very own Jeremy Thake and Paul Schaeflein do present the Microsoft 365 Developer Podcast. You can find them at www.m365devpodcast. They've got a number of different topics that have been coming up recently in terms of new APIs or things that are kind of new to Microsoft Graph. A great way to kind of stay up to date with what are some of the changes and new additions to Microsoft Graph. And also note that this session has been recorded. We will make this available on the Microsoft 365 Developer YouTube channel. You can find the link on the page on here. We do look forward to our next session, which is going to be on February 2nd at 8 a.m. Pacific time. You can find the link for joining in to get the invite for this as well. So I want to thank everyone for joining us on our January 2021 call, and we do look forward to you joining us in February. So thank you all. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.